Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for new stories from YellowCat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. What's your worst neighbor ever story? When I was 13, a new neighbor moved into the house next door to mine, which we share a driveway with. Our neighborhood is really close and like to have get-togethers and block parties, so we all got together and had a little celebration to welcome her. Immediately, it became clear that she did not like my dad. A while later, we found out that she's been telling our neighbors that my dad was inappropriate to her at the party. I know that my dad would never act like that, but he isn't a native English speaker, he's Middle Eastern, which is relevant, and hey, maybe some sort of wire got crossed and there was some kind of misunderstanding. So my dad goes to try and apologize to her. It does not go well and she tells my dad to leave, which he promptly did. Then she put up the security cameras. They absolutely covered her house, getting views of pretty much every angle, including lots of shots of our shared drive. Whatever, we thought. A lady has a right to put cameras on her house. Then the cops started showing up. She called them claiming we had messed with her cameras or that me and my friends were shining laser pointers into them. The cops would leave pretty quickly because the supposed crime involved a camera which somehow hadn't captured any evidence of the supposed crime. Then she started claiming that we were poisoning her yard. She spent a lot of time in her lawn gardening and growing plants, but for some reason every 6 months or so, she'd cut everything down and start over. Anyways, the cops started coming asking about our supposed poisoning of her lawn, but they couldn't find any evidence. We didn't have any poison, her cameras hadn't picked anything up, and we had no effing motive to poison her lawn. So she started an inquest with the Department of Agriculture. A pesticide use investigator showed up and interrogated us, then took samples from her yard. While that was going on, we had a few fun encounters with her. Once, she bought a giant floodlight and pointed it into her windows in the middle of the night. The fire department had to come and unplug it. Another time, our dinner was interrupted when a massive hazmat truck came blaring down our street. Men in heavy gear poured out and charged into her house and then, minutes later, disappointedly filed out. One guy came and told us that she had bought a Geiger counter and used it wrong and had thought that we had irradiated her house. Finally, things came to a head when she sued us to get an order of protection. She claimed that my dad was a member of an Al-Qaeda sleeper cell intent on destroying her. She also claimed that he had used his skills as an engineer to develop a device that she referred to as a white ion laser, which would allow him to turn invisible and sneak into her house. She submitted 1 terabyte of film from her camera, all of which was annotated with such incriminating evidence as Squamish leaves the house, Squamish enters the house. There were also tons of photos and notes. It was here we discovered that her cameras were pointed into my bedroom and had been filming me for years. I was a young lad by this point, so there's probably video evidence of some pretty embarrassing teenage behavior out in the aether now. We later legally forced her to move the cameras, but she kept moving them back, so I just kept my blinds closed for the better part of a decade. During the trial, the Department of Agriculture report came back. It was determined that crazy neighbor has poisoned her own lawn by over-fertilizing it. She received a fine for contaminating the groundwater. We obviously won the lawsuit and countersued her to get our own order of protection. We also had to legally get the files on us at the FBI and CIA closed since she had reported us to both agencies. Despite losing the suit, she continued to live next to us, occasionally calling the police on us or suing us again. All things accounted for, the cops were called on us 37 times, we were sued 5 times, and of course, there were the investigations with various federal agencies. It's now been 10 years, and she's finally moving out. Why, you might ask? Does she feel guilty for accusing us of crimes with no evidence for a decade? Has her paranoia finally driven her to move? No. She didn't pay her property taxes for 6 years, and her house got taken from her. She tried to sue the city on a bunch of occasions as well and failed. Womp womp. This is only a summary of the situation. There's tons more. The husband scam. So, when she first moved in, she had a husband. We thought nothing of it since plenty of people have husbands. He seemed like a nice guy too. Unlike the crazy lady, he was willing to talk to us and be cordial. He owned some local construction company and was pretty well off. Just barely a millionaire if I had to guess. Well, after about 6 months, we see him loading a bunch of his stuff into a truck and then we never see him again. By this point, we're well into the insanity, and so any crazy neighbor-related activity sent off alarm bells at our place. So my mom starts investigating. She's a lawyer, so she knows how to search through people's legal histories with a fine-tooth comb. It turns out that this guy was husband number 4. We googled the previous husbands, and what did they all have in common? All were independently wealthy business owners. None lasted more than a year with. Each one had a prenup which promised crazy neighbor a healthy sum of money. That made things start to make sense. Our neighbor isn't crazy high class or anything, but the people around us do well for themselves. Crazy neighbor didn't work. She barely left the house. Turns out, she was living off of husband money. While she's lived next to us, we've seen husband number 5 and 6 fall victim to the same scheme. She actually would have been kicked out of her house sooner, but she convinced one of them to pay her back taxes for her, buying her some time. The kids and the fake disability scam. I'll preface this by saying that her insanity inspired a certain level of reciprocal insanity in my family, and my mom especially would take time every month or so to see what she could dig up on crazy neighbors' activities. Because of that snooping, we knew that the kids were supposed to live with her, but we never saw them. One was around my age, the other was about 6 when they moved in. We'd see them maybe once every couple years leaving the house, but that was it. I can't say with any certainty that they were actually living in that house, but they were supposed to be. And if they actually did, then they had very little contact with the outside world. The disability thing comes from a similar snoop fest. We found out that she sued the city for violating her 14th Amendment right as a disabled person somehow. We looked into it, and she was claiming that she couldn't stand or walk for more than about 5 minutes. And yet most every day, we'd see her out in her yard for hours doing manual labor. That suit ultimately didn't go her way, shockingly, and I'm pretty sure it had something to do with her eventually losing her house. I think she was trying to leverage the disability thing to somehow get away with not paying her taxes, but I'm honestly not sure. Some other weird S that I just remembered. Since we share a driveway with her, our garages basically share a wall. This setup has led to some funny encounters. One time, after we already had an order of protection against her, she waltzed up to our door and rang our doorbell to try and get us to sign a document letting her tear down both of our garages so that she could enlarge hers. We told her to get the F off of our property. When it snows, we only shovel our half of the driveway/garage area since we don't want to start any trouble. One time, my dad and I were out shoveling, and she accidentally let her dog loose, not the pug from before. This is a breed I don't recognize, but to paint a picture, it's a medium-sized dog with a jacked body and a tiny head. It ran over and started barking at us and being threatening, so we threw snow on it and it ran away. One time I noticed that the wood of our shared garage wall had cracks in it, and I got curious, so I peeked into her garage. It was full to the brim with cardboard boxes, and the door looked like it had been jerry-rigged somehow. I like to believe it was booby-trapped, but that's probably an embellishment. One of her notes that was submitted during the trial cryptically read, "I fear the man with the beard." The issue was that no one in our family had a beard at the time. That one was a head-scratcher. Had a shared driveway. Outside at 4 a.m. with a laser pointer trying to find property lines, wants to put a gate up blocking the driveway, and we would have to knock on her door to come and go. Would turn around on our property and almost crush our sewer line. Tried to sleep with my husband. Party on her roof. Kick down our signs and shoot BBs at our dog. Tons more things I'm choosing to forget. F you, Shannon. My parents' neighbor owns a landscaping company, so he has a dump truck. His house is set further back from the road than theirs, so his driveway, which is right on the property line, extends past their house and next to their backyard. My dad noticed the neighbor turning the dump truck around in my parents' backyard when the ground was very soft from some recent rain. He went back and, sure enough, there were giant ruts in my parents' yard. When my dad confronted the neighbor about using their backyard to turn around, the neighbor responded by saying, "I'm sorry, but if I turned it around in my yard, it would have left ruts in my lawn." So he knew it would leave ruts, didn't want them in his yard, and left them in my parents' yard instead. There's a particular type of person who seems to feel like they're the only thing standing between society and complete collapse, and about 7 years ago, my downstairs neighbor was one of them. She was aloof and paranoid, and she'd imagine threats from almost everywhere, which made the fact that she thought of herself as some kind of secret agent all the more annoying. Said neighbor was always trying to find ways of getting me and anyone else whom she thought of as suspicious to move out of the building. She'd stage loud telephone calls with headquarters about the alarming behavior of the other tenants, like my tendency to get home after 9 in the evening, which was clearly scandalous, and frequently yell at the people who'd stand on the corner to smoke. On one occasion, I heard her shouting at someone over the placement of a flower pot in their window, which was obviously an indication that they were selling drugs. Then one afternoon, I found an official notice taped to a wall in the stairwell. It was perhaps the most ridiculous attempt at a government-sponsored document that I'd ever seen, and I'm including the time that my friend Jonathan, then 9 years old, made a flyer for bodyguard services. The atrocious grammar, poorly photoshopped seal, and distinct absence of any legitimate contact information made the thing about as realistic as a scene from NCIS. Furthermore, the reference to the past 2 years seemed to indicate me as her primary target, since I was, as far as I knew, the only resident who had been there for less time than that. Still, since the notice was clearly meant to scare someone, I decided to return the favor by taking a page out of my neighbor's own playbook. This led me to stand outside her apartment while staging my own fake phone call. You should see the notice, it's terrible. Yeah, it's like they didn't know that impersonating a federal officer is a felony. Anyway, the real FBI are on their way, and they're going to dust for fingerprints. Whoever made that notice is looking at a lot of jail time. I went back inside my apartment after that, and within seconds, I heard my neighbor's door open. There was the sound of hurried footsteps rushing towards the stairwell, followed by an equally hurried retreat. When I went out to check 5 minutes later, the notice was gone. I've since moved away, but for the rest of the time I lived there, the lady never bothered me again. Thank you for watching. Guys, thank you for all the support and likes. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. See you next time.